Cody never imagined that a single moment could change his life forever. He was just a kid, fixing motorcycles in his garage, dreaming of a future he thought was far beyond his reach. But when he stepped onto the motocross track that day, everything shifted. He saw something no one else did, something that saved a billionaire's son from a deadly accident. But what seemed like a simple act of bravery was only the beginning of a much bigger mystery: a sabotaged bike, a hidden past, and a powerful man who knew his mother's name. As Cody searches for answers, he uncovers a truth that was buried for over a decade, a secret that connects him to the one man he never expected. Stay until the end, because this isn't just a story about fate. It's about betrayal, second chances, and a family neither of them knew existed. Now tell us, where are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Cody's hands were still stained with grease from the morning's work when his mother handed him the small package. Deliver this to the event center, Cody. They need those parts before the race starts. He nodded, tucking the package under his arm, excitement flickering in his chest. It wasn't every day that he got to see professional motocross bikes up close. He pedaled fast toward the event, weaving through traffic with the ease of someone who had spent years navigating the town's streets on his bicycle. As he approached the motocross venue, the roar of engines filled the air, the smell of gasoline and dirt thick around him. Through the gaps in the crowd, he spotted the competitors preparing their bikes, their teams bustling around them with last-minute adjustments. That's when he saw him, Logan Whitmore, standing beside his custom-built bike, talking to his team. Logan was the son of the billionaire Alexander Whitmore, a name Cody knew well from news reports and headlines. The boy had everything: talent, money, and the best equipment. Cody was about to turn away when something caught his attention. One of Logan's mechanics, a tall man with a grim expression, was crouched beside the bike, replacing a component near the brakes. Cody squinted, his brain immediately analyzing the man's movements. Something about it was wrong. Cody had spent years fixing bikes, learning the way every bolt and wire connected, how each part functioned in perfect harmony or failed when tampered. With the mechanic's hands moved too quickly, too deliberately, as he swapped out a small piece for another that looked nearly identical. But Cody knew better. His gut twisted. The brake system. His fingers tightened around the package he was supposed to deliver, his instincts screaming that something wasn't right. He wanted to get closer, to see exactly what was happening, but security patrolled the area, keeping unauthorized people away from the competitors' bikes. If he tried to intervene now, no one would take him seriously. Who would believe a 12-year-old kid over a professional mechanic? He had no proof, just a gnawing certainty in his chest that something was off. Cody hesitated, watching as the mechanic stood, brushing off his hands, a satisfied expression flashing across his face before he disappeared into the crowd. He had seen enough. The race began with the deafening roar of engines. Cody had barely made it into the stands when the competitors shot off the starting line, kicking up dirt as they tore through the track. Logan was in the lead, his bike maneuvering effortlessly around tight bends and high jumps. But Cody wasn't watching the race the way everyone else was. His eyes were locked on Logan's hands, on the way his fingers would tighten around the brakes when approaching sharp turns. And then it happened. Logan reached a particularly dangerous curve, leaned forward, and pulled the brake lever. Nothing. The bike didn't slow down. Cody's heart leapt into his throat. Logan tried again, his body shifting in panic as the bike continued at full speed toward the barrier. The malfunction was real. It wasn't just his imagination. His brain raced through calculations, instinctively analyzing distances, speeds, and angles. If Logan hit the barrier at that velocity, the impact could be deadly. Without thinking, Cody bolted. His legs carried him forward before his mind could catch up, pushing past startled spectators as he sprinted toward the edge of the track. He spotted the emergency system, the barrier trigger, just a few feet away. If he could reach it in time, it would deploy the protective cushion before Logan crashed. He heard shouts behind him, but he didn't stop. His fingers slammed against the trigger just as Logan's bike lost complete control. The barrier shot up a fraction of a second before impact. Logan's bike collided, sending him flying through the air. The world seemed to slow as Cody watched the older boy twist mid-air before crashing onto the dirt, rolling several times before coming to a stop. For a horrifying moment, everything was silent. Then the gasps and screams erupted from the crowd. Medics rushed onto the track. Logan lay still, his helmet slightly tilted, dust covering his riding suit. Cody barely had time to catch his breath before strong hands grabbed him from behind. "Got him!" a voice barked. Two security guards restrained him, their grips tight, their expressions hard with suspicion. You ran onto the track. You interfered with the race." Cody struggled, his heart still racing from the adrenaline, but he couldn't break free. "You don't understand," he gasped. "The brakes, they were tampered with. He would have crashed." His words were cut off as one of the guards tightened his grip. The crowd was still in chaos, voices rising in confusion and fear. Cody knew how this looked. A random kid running onto the track, causing an accident. No one would believe he had saved Logan's life. His stomach twisted. Then a voice cut through the noise. "Stop!" Logan. He was sitting up now, his helmet removed, revealing a cut on his forehead and a dazed expression. The medics tried to hold him back, but he ignored them, his sharp blue eyes locking onto Cody. "Let him go," Logan said, his voice hoarse but firm. The guards hesitated. "Mr. Whitmore, if he hadn't done that," Logan interrupted, "I'd be dead." The words hit like a slap against the air. A stunned silence followed. Cody felt the grip on his arms loosen, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. Logan pushed himself to his feet, wobbling slightly before regaining his balance. His gaze never left Cody. For the first time since the race began, Cody realized something Logan knew. He knew something had been wrong with his bike. And now, Cody wasn't the only one looking for answers. The grip on Cody's arm tightened as the security guard led him through a hallway behind the main event center. His mind raced, his heart still pounding from the chaos of the track. The murmurs and distant sounds of the motocross event faded behind the thick walls, replaced by an eerie stillness that only heightened his nerves. He had no idea where they were taking him, but one thing was certain: this wasn't over. The door ahead swung open and he was pushed inside. The room was large, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the track. At the center stood a man Cody recognized. Immediately, Alexander Whitmore. The billionaire's reputation preceded him. He was known for being ruthless in business, a mastermind in the automotive industry, a man who built an empire from precision and control. Yet, as Cody stood in front of him, covered in dirt and grease, he saw none of the cold authority from the news articles. Instead, Whitmore studied him with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. The silence stretched until the billionaire finally spoke, his voice measured, calm but firm. "Who are you, kid?" Cody swallowed hard, his fists clenching at his sides. He could feel the weight of the question pressing down on him, but he refused to shrink under it. "Cody Williams," he answered, his voice steady. "I fix bikes." Whitmore raised an eyebrow, his gaze sharp, calculating. He turned toward the mechanics, huddled near Logan's damaged bike. They had been inspecting the remains of the brake system, murmuring among themselves, their expressions growing darker by the second. One of them, an older man with years of experience evident in the lines on his face, finally stepped forward. "It's sabotage," he said, holding up a small, worn-out component. "The brake cylinder was swapped for a faulty one. Someone did this on purpose." The words sent a wave of tension through the room. Logan, sitting on a leather chair with an ice pack against his bruised shoulder, let out a frustrated exhale. "I knew something felt off," he muttered. Cody watched Whitmore's expression shift, a flicker of something dangerous behind his eyes. Not anger, calculation. This wasn't just an accident, it was an attack. Whitmore turned back to Cody, his interest in the boy suddenly deepening. "You noticed it before anyone else," he said. More of a statement than a question. Cody nodded, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of the billionaire's gaze. "Yeah," he admitted. "I saw one of your mechanics switch it out before the race. It didn't look right." The room fell silent again. The security guards exchanged glances. The mechanics stiffened. Logan sat up straighter. "Why? Didn't you say something?" Whitmore asked, crossing his arms. Cody shrugged, his voice edged with frustration. "Who would have listened to me? I'm just some kid who fixes bikes in his garage. Your people would have ignored me. I did the only thing I could." The weight of his words hung in the air. Whitmore studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable, before he finally spoke again. "You saved my son's life." Cody nodded, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The tension shifted. Whitmore gestured to one of his assistants, a woman standing by the door, who stepped forward and whispered something to him. He gave a brief nod before returning his gaze to Cody. "You deserve a reward," he said. "Whatever you want, name it." Cody's body tensed. He hadn't done it for money. He hadn't done it for recognition. He had done it because he couldn't stand there and watch something terrible happen when he knew he could stop it. He shook his head. "I don't want anything," he said firmly. Logan looked at him in surprise. Whitmore's expression remained unreadable. "Everyone wants something," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight. Cody held his ground. "Not me." For the first time, something flickered in Whitmore's eyes, a strange mixture of respect and curiosity. He wasn't used to hearing that answer. The billionaire exhaled, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "All right," he said finally. "Then answer me this. How did you know?" Cody hesitated. How could he explain it? It wasn't just experience, it was instinct. A gut feeling combined with years of working on broken machines, recognizing patterns, noticing details that most people overlooked. "I just knew," he said simply. Whitmore didn't look satisfied with the answer, but he let it go, for now. Instead, he changed tactics. "Come with me," he said, his tone making it clear that it wasn't a request. Cody stiffened. "Where?" "To my house," Whitmore replied. "I want to know more about you." Cody hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to say no. This man was a billionaire. He lived in a world completely different from Cody's. What did he want from him? What was he trying to figure out? But at the same time, a part of Cody was curious too. What if this was an opportunity? What if saying yes changed everything? Logan stood, still wincing from his injuries. "Come on," he said. "My dad's not as scary as he looks." Cody gave him a skeptical look, but Logan only smirked. The mechanics continued murmuring in the background, discussing the sabotage, but Cody barely heard them. His mind was already racing through the possibilities. If he went with Whitmore, he might learn more about who had done this. He might get closer to understanding the kind of world Logan lived in, the world he had just stumbled into by accident. Finally, he made his decision. "All right," he said, meeting Whitmore's eyes. "I'll go." The billionaire nodded once, satisfied. The security guard stepped aside and the door opened again. As Cody walked through it, he had the strange feeling that this was just the beginning. Cody followed Logan through the towering iron gates, his steps hesitant as they moved toward the massive Whitmore estate. He had expected something impressive, but the sheer size of the mansion stunned him into silence. It wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of wealth, a place so far removed from his reality that it felt like stepping into another world. Marble pillars lined the entrance, stretching toward a ceiling so high it seemed endless. Expensive cars were parked in pristine formation along the driveway, each one more luxurious than the last. The air carried the faint scent of polished wood and something unfamiliar, something Cody couldn't name, but that reeked of wealth and privilege. He felt out of place instantly. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was a kid who spent his days fixing broken things, not standing in the home of a billionaire. As they stepped inside, a few staff members paused in their tasks, their eyes darting toward him with barely concealed curiosity. Their expressions weren't hostile, but they weren't exactly welcoming either. Cody felt the weight of their silent judgment pressing down on him. He didn't belong in this world, and they knew it. Logan, however, acted as if nothing was unusual. He walked through the house with ease, occasionally glancing back at Cody, who hesitated at every doorway, unsure if he was even allowed to step further inside. "Come on," Logan said, waving him forward. "It's just a house." Just a house? Cody doubted that. He trailed behind, glancing at the enormous paintings lining the walls, the sculptures positioned like trophies, the grand staircase that looked like something straight out of a movie. Logan flopped onto a couch in what seemed like the living room, though it was bigger than Cody's entire home. "So," Logan said, stretching his legs out, "you never really told me. How do you know so much about fixing bikes?" Cody hesitated before answering. "My mom taught me," he said, sitting cautiously on the edge of a chair. "She used to work on cars, motorcycles, anything she could get her hands on. I guess I picked it up from watching her." Logan looked interested. "She still works on them?" Cody shook his head. "No, not anymore." He didn't elaborate, and Logan didn't press. Instead, he leaned forward. "What's her name?" Cody exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Evelyn. Evelyn Williams." The moment the name left his lips, something changed. Logan didn't react, but across the room, Cody noticed something strange. Alexander Whitmore, who had just stepped in, stopped abruptly. His hand, which had been adjusting the cuff of his sleeve, froze mid-motion. It was only for a second, a blink and you'd miss it kind of moment, but Cody caught it. The billionaire's face remained unreadable, his posture unchanged, yet something had shifted in the air. Cody felt it. Logan was still talking, oblivious to the sudden tension in the room, but Cody wasn't listening anymore. He kept his eyes on Alexander, watching as the man seemed to gather himself before stepping forward, his expression neutral, his voice smooth. "Cody," he said, as if nothing had happened. "I imagine this has been a strange day for you." Cody nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had seen that reaction. He knew when people were caught off guard, and Alexander had definitely been caught off guard. The man's control was precise, but for that brief moment, something had cracked. Cody didn't know why, but he intended to find out. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Logan was chatty, eager to show Cody the mansion, dragging him through endless rooms filled with things he had only ever seen in magazines. But through it all, Cody couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He kept replaying that moment in his mind, the way Alexander had frozen at his mother's name. There was a connection there, something Cody didn't understand yet. That night, after the house had settled into an eerie quiet, Alexander Whitmore sat alone in his private study, a single lamp casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk. In front of him was an old file, one that hadn't been touched in years. His fingers hesitated before flipping it open. The first page held a familiar name, Evelyn Williams. His pulse quickened as he turned through the documents, scanning old employment records, personal details, and then there it was, a photograph. A younger Evelyn, her eyes sharp with determination, standing near the mansion's garden. Alexander stared at the image for a long moment before his gaze drifted lower to the final entry in the file. Employment terminated. Left without notice. No further contact. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. He had never known why Evelyn had left so suddenly. One day she had been there, working diligently, never once causing trouble, and then she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. And now, years later, her son had walked into his home as if fate had pulled him back. Alexander's grip on the file tightened. He exhaled slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I never knew she had a child." The words felt heavy in the quiet of the room. He looked back at the photograph, his mind racing through possibilities. Why had she left? And more importantly, why had she never told him about the boy? His jaw tightened. There were too many questions, too many missing pieces. One thing was clear: Cody showing up today wasn't a coincidence. And Alexander Whitmore didn't believe in coincidences. Alexander's grip on the file tightened as his mind raced through the implications of what he had just discovered. Evelyn Williams had worked in his home years ago, disappearing without explanation. And now, her son stood under his roof. It wasn't just a coincidence. He exhaled slowly, forcing his thoughts back to the immediate danger. Someone had sabotaged Logan's bike, and that wasn't just an act of recklessness. It was attempted murder. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Pushing the file aside, he stood and left his study, his steps firm as he moved through the hallways of his estate. Cody and Logan were still in the main lounge, sitting across from each other. Logan looked at ease, flipping through his phone, while Cody, ever observant, seemed tense, as if still unsure whether he truly belonged in this house. Alexander stopped near them, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Cody," he said, his voice steady, but leaving no room for argument. "Come with me." Cody glanced at Logan, who gave a slight shrug before standing. "Where are we going?" Cody asked, his tone wary. "To the garage," Alexander answered. "I need you to take another look at the bike." Cody followed Alexander down a different corridor, one that led into a sleek, state-of-the-art garage. Logan's bike was still there, set on a raised platform, the damaged brake system partially disassembled by Whitmore's best mechanics. Cody didn't need an invitation. He stepped forward, his hands instinctively moving over the exposed parts, his sharp eyes scanning for anything out of place. He ran his fingers over the brake cylinder, his brows knitting together in concentration. "This wasn't a mistake," he muttered. Alexander, standing a few feet away, crossed his arms. "Explain." Cody glanced at him before turning his focus back to the mechanics. A normal failure would show signs of wear, small fractures, gradual loss of efficiency. But this, he lifted the faulty component, tilting it in the light. This was swapped out deliberately. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Alexander's jaw tightened. "Someone tried to kill my son." Cody nodded, his grip on the part firm. "And they almost succeeded." Before Alexander could respond, the overhead lights flickered. A faint, unnatural silence settled over the garage, and then chaos. The distant sound of shouts and crashes erupted through the estate, followed by the unmistakable commotion of a struggle. Alexander's instincts kicked in immediately. "Stay here," he ordered, moving toward the door, but before he could take another step, the entrance was blown open. The explosion of movement sent Cody stumbling. Back as masked figures stormed in, their presence swift and calculated. They moved like professionals, their weapons drawn, their target clear. Cody barely had time to react before one of them lunged at him. He ducked, his reflexes sharp, narrowly avoiding the man's grip. Alexander moved fast, reaching for the emergency panel near the wall, but one of the intruders fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Don't!" a voice commanded. "You're already outnumbered, Whitmore." Logan appeared at the far end of the garage, his expression twisting in shock as he took in the scene. "Logan, run!" Cody yelled. The masked men advanced. Logan hesitated for only a second before sprinting toward the opposite exit. Cody moved before he could think, diving low and kicking over a metal toolbox, sending tools skidding across the floor. It was enough to break the nearest attacker's momentum, giving Cody the opening he needed. He darted toward Logan, his mind racing. They had to get out, now. Alexander, still cornered, locked eyes with the leader of the masked men. The intruder's voice was low, steady, and unmistakably personal. "You already lost one son, Whitmore," he murmured. "Don't make us. You take the other." Alexander's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, his muscles tensing at the words. Whoever these men were, they knew him, and worse, they knew his past. Cody grabbed Logan's wrist, pulling him toward the side door. The intruders moved fast, but Cody was faster. His mind worked like a machine, scanning the space, finding the fastest way out. "Go!" he shouted, pushing Logan ahead. They ran through the back passageway, the sound of pursuit close behind. The adrenaline in Cody's veins kept him moving, his focus razor-sharp. If they stopped, if they hesitated for even a second, they were done. He could hear Alexander fighting in the distance, the sound of bodies colliding, grunts of effort. But there was no time to go back. They had to escape. Bursting through a side entrance, Cody spotted the service road leading toward the estate's perimeter. A vehicle was parked. Nearby, a motorcycle, probably one of the security patrols. Logan saw it too. "Can you drive it?" Logan asked, breathless. Cody shot him a look. "Seriously, I can fix them. Of course I can drive it." Without another word, Cody jumped onto the bike, Logan scrambling behind him. He yanked the ignition, wires, hot-wiring it with practiced efficiency. The moment the engine roared to life, the garage doors behind them were thrown open. The masked men stormed out, their weapons raised. "Hold on!" Cody shouted, twisting the throttle. The bike shot forward, tires screeching against the pavement. A shot rang out, missing them by inches. Logan clung to Cody as they sped away from the estate, the shouts of their pursuers fading behind them. Cody didn't know where they were going, didn't know what the hell had just happened, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a sabotaged race. This was bigger, much bigger, and now he was in the middle of it. Cody sat in the corner of the dimly lit room, his arms wrapped tightly around himself, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened. The adrenaline had begun to wear off, leaving behind exhaustion and confusion. He and Logan had barely escaped with their lives, and now they were locked. Inside Whitmore's private study, the weight of the past hours pressing heavily upon them. Alexander stood near the fireplace, his jaw clenched, deep in thought. His usually controlled demeanor was strained, his posture rigid. The attack had shaken him, but something else simmered beneath the surface, something directed at Cody. The silence stretched unbearably before Alexander finally turned to face him, his eyes dark with an intensity that made Cody's stomach tighten. "I need to know about your mother," he said, his voice carrying a sharp edge. "Evelyn Williams, tell me everything you know." Cody hesitated, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. He had never spoken much about his mother's past, mostly because he knew almost nothing. "She never really talked about before," he admitted. "I asked once, when I was younger, why we had to move around so much, why she never wanted to stay in one place. She just said that life used to be different, that things were better before she left this city." He glanced at Alexander, unsure why the man cared so much. "But she never told me why she left, or what she was running from." Alexander exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands over his face, a rare moment of vulnerability slipping through the cracks of his usually impenetrable exterior. Cody had seen the man be cold, calculating, precise. But this was different. It wasn't the frustration of a billionaire dealing with a security breach. This was personal. "She left," Alexander murmured, more to himself than to Cody. "And she never told me why." The statement hung in the air, heavy with implications Cody didn't yet understand. Logan, who had been watching the exchange quietly, sat forward. "What's going on?" he asked, his gaze flicking between his father and Cody. "Why do you care so much about his mom?" Alexander hesitated, his fingers curling slightly at his sides as if bracing himself for what came next. He turned back to Cody, and in that moment, the boy saw something strange in his expression. Regret. "Your mother," Alexander said carefully, "wasn't just a staff member in my house." Cody stiffened, a strange feeling creeping up his spine. Alexander continued, his voice quieter now, almost cautious. "Years ago, before Logan was born, Evelyn and I were involved." Cody's pulse pounded in his ears, his fingers digging into the fabric of his sleeves. Involved? He echoed, barely able to get the word out. Alexander nodded, his expression unreadable. We were in love. Cody felt his stomach drop, a hollow sensation spreading through his chest. He shook his head, his voice hoarse. No, he said instinctively, that doesn't make sense. But the way Alexander looked at him told him it did. I was young, Alexander admitted, and stupid. My family expected me to marry someone else, someone who would benefit the company, our legacy. His eyes darkened. I let them control me, and I chose business over love. Logan had gone completely still, his usual smirk replaced by wide-eyed shock. Cody could barely breathe. He had spent his whole life believing he was just some kid, no different from the others struggling to get by. But now, in a single moment, everything had changed. Evelyn left, Alexander continued, his voice heavy. I thought it was because she was heartbroken because I had betrayed her, but now I realize she was pregnant. Cody's body went rigid, his breath catching in his throat. The world tilted beneath him as he struggled to process what he was hearing. No, he said again, shaking his head. That can't be. But Alexander didn't flinch. His face was filled with a quiet certainty. You're my son, Cody. The words felt impossible, unreal. Cody had never known his father, never even questioned it because his mother had made it clear. He didn't have one, or at least none that mattered. And yet here he was, sitting in front of one of the most powerful men in the country, being told that everything he thought he knew was a lie. He felt the burn of emotion rise in his chest, but he didn't know what to do with it. Then, Cody swallowed hard, forcing himself to say it out loud. You're my father? The words felt foreign, wrong in his mouth. Alexander's expression softened, and for the first time since Cody had met him, the man looked vulnerable. And I never knew I had a son to protect. The admission sent another jolt through Cody's chest, but before he could process it, a sharp ringing shattered the silence. Alexander pulled out his phone, his expression immediately darkening as he answered. A voice crackled on the other end, low and unfamiliar. You got lucky tonight, Whitmore, the caller said. But you won't be next time. Alexander's grip on the phone tightened. Who the hell are you? The voice chuckled, a cold, detached sound. You saved Logan once, the man said, but you won't be able to do it again. And then the line went dead. Alexander lowered the phone slowly, his jaw clenching as realization settled over him. This wasn't over. Whoever had come for Logan wasn't finished. And now, there were two sons to protect. Cody sat frozen, his mind still trying to catch up with everything that had happened. But one thing was clear, his life would never be the same again. This story gave us so much to think about, didn't it? And for you, what was the biggest lesson from this moment? We'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. Every story we bring to you is created with great care and takes days to prepare. Your support helps us keep sharing special content. Thank you for being part of this journey with us, and see you in the next video.